You know that moment when everyone finally leaves? The door closes, the noise drops, and something in you doesn't just relax. It arrives, like you've been slightly out of focus all day, and the quiet just corrected it. That feeling has a name. It just isn't loneliness. Most people understand solitude as an absence, the absence of company, of noise, of connection. But for a certain kind of person, solitude isn't an absence at all. It's a presence, a specific, stable, recognizable state of being where they feel most accurately themselves. Think about this. You turn down an invitation, not because you're tired, not because you're sad, but because the idea of being alone tonight feels right. And even as you say no, you notice the pause on the other end, the concern, the unspoken question, are you okay? You are. You just don't have language for why this feels necessary instead of optional. Psychologists studying identity and self-concept have found that some people possess what researchers call a strong dispositional tendency towards solitude, meaning aloneness isn't something they fall into when social options run dry. It's something they actively, consistently return to, not as escape, as orientation. The way a compass doesn't choose north, it just points there. And here's the key mechanism behind it. When your nervous system is wired to process more information internally, solitude becomes the environment where regulation happens. Noise, conversation, constant responsiveness, even when pleasant, subtly overload the system. Alone time isn't indulgence, it's calibration. That's why clarity tends to arrive only after the world goes quiet. That's not preference, that's cause and effect. Somewhere in your development, the inner world became the primary world, the place where things made sense, where feelings got sorted, where you existed without translation. The outer world has always required a version of you that performs, adapts, manages. But alone, there's no performance, just the raw, unedited experience of being you. And for people wired this way, that is not a small thing. That is everything. But here's the tension that lives inside it. When your truest self only fully surfaces in solitude, intimacy becomes quietly complicated, because intimacy asks you to bring that interior self out into the open, into a relationship, a conversation, a moment of genuine vulnerability with another person. And that can feel like being asked to do something structurally unnatural. Not impossible, not unwanted, but effortful in a way that's hard to explain to someone who doesn't feel it. What protects your sense of self also creates distance between you and the people who want to reach it. You're not cold, you're not closed, you're just most alive in a place other people can't easily follow you into. And that specific gap between your richest self and your visible self is something you've probably felt your whole life without quite having words for it. The cost isn't loneliness. It's the low, persistent ache of being deeply known by almost no one. Here's what that deserves, not as comfort, but as clarity. You don't need to dismantle the interior life to let people in. You don't need to become louder, more available, more legible to a world that reads quiet as distance. But you might need to accept something harder, that some parts of you will always live best in private, and that sharing them will never feel natural, even with people who love you. The love of solitude doesn't make you incapable of connection. It makes you selective about it. And selectivity, in a culture that confuses constant access with intimacy, is often misunderstood, sometimes even by the people closest to you. You know who you are when no one is watching. That's rarer than it sounds. Most people spend their entire lives trying to find that out. If this reached something that usually stays quiet, subscribe. There's more thinking like this here, and it tends to get closer the longer you stay. Next, we're exploring the psychology of people who feel more like themselves at night, why darkness loosens something in certain minds, and what that shift after sunset is actually reaching for. If you've ever felt more real at midnight than at noon, that one might leave you sitting with something you haven't named yet.